Hi guys, and welcome to 5-Minute Martial Arts Mastery. I'd like to start off by asking 3 simple questions. The first question is, if we look at the traditional martial arts over the last couple of 100 years, why do you suppose it was that they placed such an emphasis on character and integrity? You couldn't go and train with a martial arts master if you were a person of poor repute, a person with a bad temper, a person with a history of violence or instability. Why do you suppose that was? If we compare that to today's martial arts, which very often have turned into sports, we see the opposite, don't we? We see icons of sports. We see boxers getting into brushes with the law. We see MMA champions throwing chairs at buses, beating up people. There's clearly an ego issue. There may even be mental instability. And so my second question to you would be, why do you suppose the traditional martial arts placed such an emphasis on attributes like calmness, reflection? Why do so many of them incorporate meditation, both sitting and moving, into their practice? We tend to write those things off today as being largely superfluous or being just an art or unnecessary. But on reflection, we see that they are actually very necessary, and I'll explain why in just a moment. And the third question I'd like to ask you is this. These attributes, these skills, the internal skills, not just the ability to fight, are these skills transferable and applicable to today's world? As I shoot this video, we are in the middle of a lockdown in South Africa. For the first time in history, half the human population on this planet has been restricted from movement. And it's because of an invisible enemy, an enemy that we can't see with the naked eye, an enemy that is insidious and invisible. And for a lot of people, that can be very frightening. It can be a very uncertain time, and it is. Economies are in trouble. People are losing their jobs. There's a huge amount of instability and fragility in the world right now. And that may or may not be a good thing. I understand that on a certain level it is a bad thing. But on another level, it offers us the opportunity to examine who we really are. Mark Owen is an author and a Navy SEAL who was part of SEAL Team 6 a couple of years ago, who were responsible for capturing Osama bin Laden. And in his book called No Hero, Mark writes about the training he underwent. And in one of their training exercises, they get taken out to the desert outside of Las Vegas, and they are made to climb these enormous rock mesas. I'm sure you've seen them. They're just like enormous spires of rock rising up out of the desert, 300-400 feet high. And he speaks about one experience where he was halfway up one of these enormous rocks, 100 feet off the ground. He had support personnel around him. These guys had ropes and could catch him if he fell. But he said he was frozen with fear, and he couldn't find a way up, couldn't find a way down, and had basically resigned himself to possibly plummeting to his death. And as that thought crossed his mind, one of the guys who was helping him swung across on a rope with a cigarette in his mouth and said, "Hey, bud, you need to learn to stay in your 3-foot world." And that became a bit of a catchphrase. It made a deep impact on me because it made me realize something. What they were really saying is that the 3-foot world, the 1-meter space around you, is the one thing you have immediate control of. And as soon as we start focusing on things outside of that, as soon as we start looking at the lights of Las Vegas, you can't gamble yourself off a rock face. You can't depend on someone else to get you off the rock face. You need to stay in your 3-foot world and look for the next foothold and the next toehold. And in the uncertain time that we find ourselves in, a lot of people are freaking out. They're going, what if this happens? What if that happens? And one of the best pieces of advice that I can give from a martial arts perspective is right now, stay in your 3-foot world. There are 3 stays I'm going to be sharing with you. And the first one is stay in your 3-foot world. Stay in a space where you can control what happens to you. There are certain things outside of your control. Don't worry about them right now. Seek the next step forward. The second stay that I want to share with you is this. Stay moving. We know in the martial arts, we know in our system of Krav Maga, and as a general principle of combatives, that fear freezes you. And when people feel fearful, when they feel uncertain, they freeze. Should I go forward? Should I go backward? Should I stay put? What do I do in the midst of this crisis that's unfolding around me? And the best advice I can give is stay moving. For those of you who practice our system of Krav Maga and martial arts in general, you'll know that the martial arts places a high premium on flow and movement. And there's a reason for that. If you stiffen up, you die. And that process, that principle, applies in combat just as much as it applies in life. If you freeze up, if you don't do anything, then you become a sitting duck for circumstances, and more importantly, for what's going on in your own mind. It's very true that sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. So my advice is stay moving. Take massive action. The antidote to fear is action. Whatever it is that you choose today, do it with your whole heart. Embark on something, have a plan, set things up, order your own life, and take control of the things that you can control. The third stay that I want to share with you is stay visionary. I'm sure some of you will have heard of a man named Viktor Frankl, possibly even read his book, which is called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was a doctor who was an inmate of Auschwitz death camp in Nazi Germany, and he survived. He survived the Holocaust. And it's a remarkable book. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but he describes the rationale behind why he survived and why so many others died. It had to do with what he visualized. It had to do with what he was looking forward to. It had to do with the scenario that he created in his own mind. In the book, he describes one particularly horrific instance where he was strapped down to a table. He was being used for invasive medical experiments. And he says he just closed his eyes and he vowed that he would get out of that terrible situation and one day be standing on a stage in front of thousands of people, sharing with them the story of his journey so that it would inspire them to do the same thing. And many years later, after the war, when he was in the US, he was invited to speak at Carnegie Hall. And he says, as he stepped onto the stage and the curtains swept aside, he said it was literally the way he'd visualized it. The same curtains, the same colors, the same shape of the hall, the same people. His dream, his vision, had come to life in the most remarkable and miraculous way. And so I just want to reassure you that it's very, very important to stay visionary. That's the third stay I want to leave with you. Have a vision for what you want the future to be. It's easy to fall into despair. It's easy to fall into resignation at things we can't control. But I want you to again put yourself in the shoes of the martial artists of old who weren't competing for a trophy. They weren't competing in a wrestling match or a boxing match where there was a referee. They knew that in the morning when they faced their opponent, one of them would die. They had to cultivate an astonishing amount of mental and psychological power to overcome that. They had to be calm, they had to be disciplined, they had to be focused, and above all, they had to be visionary. Because if you knew that you were going to face someone tomorrow morning who could potentially kill you, would you rather focus on the possibility of dying or the possibility of living? I want to encourage you to be visionary today. So in summary, there are 3 stays that I want to leave with you. The first one, as I mentioned, is stay in your 3-foot world. Control the things that you have control over. Focus on your internal locus of control. The famous Japanese swordsman Miyamoto Musashi said, "Seek nothing outside of yourself. The answers are found within." The second stay is stay moving. Take action. Be open to creativity and be open to possibility in your life right now. And the third stay is stay visionary. Remember that thoughts become things. What you think today is what you become tomorrow. These are universal principles. They apply to the martial arts, and we apply them to our system of Krav Maga as well. Think deeper, live deeper, and I'll see you in the next clip.